Hey guys, all right, so let's go from the transition from that forethought to chapters 1 and chapter 2. And let's just dig into this man a little bit more in his book. So we looked at how in the forethought he begins by letting us know about that he's going to sketch in vague, uncertain outline the spiritual world in which 10,000 Americans live and strive. And he lets us know that in the first two chapters, he's tried to show what emancipation has meant for the African American community. So here he is, 20 years after the Civil War, 20 years after Reconstruction, and he's going to try and give you a history of what did emancipation mean leading up to it, and what has it meant since that Emancipation Proclamation. And so when we go to have a look at chapter 1 of our spiritual strivings, let's think a little bit about how he's going to bring a reader into his world, into the world of 10,000 souls. And he starts then with the spiritual. And as I said before, it means that in order to enter into his world, he starts with what could be a hurdle, especially to a white audience that might not know these songs. Whereas people who were familiar with it, as they began reading, they would have heard the voices, would have heard the music, and it would have taken a curious person to play these tunes out and to think to themselves, how does that sound? Or to seek out someone who could have sung these for them, right? O water, voice of my heart, crying in the sand all night long, crying with a mournful cry. What does it mean when you are on the wrong side of the color line, and how do you live creatively with the distress that such living implies? And in the sorrow songs, what you hear is that movement from the depth of sorrow into the creative moment of expression, through which a kind of transformation of subjectivity can happen, because you move from feeling to expressing and giving shape to your experience and potentially inspiring and connecting with other human voices. So the singing of a song itself can be the birth and the movement into an experience of subjectivity, right? Let's think a little bit about Equiano and the trope of the talking book. To move from being object towards being creative, expressive subject. And he begins, between me and the other world, there is ever an unasked question, unasked by some through feelings of delicacy, by others through the difficulty of rightly framing it. All, nevertheless, flutter round it. They approach me in a half-hesitant sort of way, eye me curiously or compassionately, and then, instead of saying directly, how does it feel to be a problem? They say, I know an excellent colored man in my town, or I fought at Mechanicsville, or do not these southern outrages make your blood boil? At these I smile, or am interested, or reduce the boiling to a simmer, as the occasion may require. To the real question, how does it feel to be a problem? I answer, seldom a word. So once again, just like in the forethought, he's beginning us with a depiction of two bodies on the land, and the encounter between the two of them sets up, in fact, a difference whereby the one has a critical perspective on what the other sees, does, has access to, and even how the other sees you. So he's starting again with this color line motif, two humans on that landscape. And the idea that it has required a great amount of silence on his part to endure the experience of having people who look perhaps even compassionately at him, but nevertheless, through the asking of their question, place him in the position of being a problem. Right. So then on page 2, he writes, about the middle of the page, "Why did God make me an outcast and a stranger in mine own house?" Now let's think Charles Long here. What does it mean to be the person on a landscape who, upon realizing when his classmate rejects his little business calling card, upon realizing that he lives in a world with a color line that will deny him access to and the rights to liberty and creativity, he wants to remonstrate with his God. I got to hear Bishop Desmond Tutu one time speak about that position of remonstrating with your God. Why would you make me an outcast and a stranger in mine own house? So let's think about that human on the landscape, literally within the home in which he was born. You've got to ask the question, what is the ultimate significance of my place in a world in which I am an object? What kind of relationship to ultimacy, to God, can I have that I have been placed in this position? How can my life have meaning here? Now I want to go from there to with chapter, and we could do this. Do you understand? We could do this paragraph by paragraph. Just break open these moments and think about them. With chapter 2 of The Dawn of Freedom, I want you to think about that body standing on the edge of that of this globe, let's say, this earth, and with freedom, the dawn of freedom starting to cast a light out across that globe. And the first words of the song, we've got to dip through a song in order to get into this depiction of the souls of black folk. Careless seems the great avenger. Right? What is my ultimate significance? It's looking a lot like that ultimate power of the divine is careless. How can my experiences of my spirit, my soul, my community be under this kind of repression if the great avenger was awake? Right? Careless seems the great avenger. History's lessons but record. One death grapple in the darkness, twixt old systems and the word. So it, like, history keeps showing us, but particularly in African American history, has to leave you asking the question, is God careless? How can this kind of cruelty be happening? And he begins, the problem of the 20th century. The 20th century is the problem of the color line. The relation of the darker to the lighter races of men in Asia and Africa, in America and the islands of the sea. It was a phase of this problem that caused the Civil War. And however much they who marched north, south and north in 1861 may have fixed on the technical points of union and local autonomy as a shibboleth, all nevertheless know, as we know, that the question of Negro slavery was the real cause of the conflict. And it's quite interesting now as we reach, are we reaching the 150th anniversary of the Civil War, and there's been quite a bit of um, effort to look at that war and think, oh, was this really about economics? Was this really about the War of Northern Aggression? That's a term that's often used. Um, but the more that great historians look carefully and deeply, the more that there's really no doubt about the willed desire to maintain a slaveocracy in America as the root causes of the Civil War. I think there's one more spot in here. Let's look at page 12. And I've only got a minute or so. 3 characteristics, things one might have seen in Sherman's raid through Georgia, which threw the new situation in shadowy relief. Here's the 3. The conqueror, it's going to be the Northern Army. The conquered, it's going to be the folks in the South. And the Negro. Here are your 3 forces. Some see all significance in the grim front of the destroyer, right? That the meaning of the Civil War was the Union, the Northern troops. And some in the bitter sufferers of the lost cause. And the lost cause is the name given to the fight to secede and maintain a slaveocracy. But to me, neither soldier nor fugitive, so neither the Northern soldiers nor the Southern folks, with so deep a meaning, speaks with so deep a meaning as that dark human cloud that clung like remorse on the rear of these swift columns, swelling at times to half their size, almost engulfing and choking them. Right? What's he talking about here? He's talking about the body of the 10,000 souls, the 10,000 souls, to him speak most loudly about the meaning of that Civil War. In vain were they ordered back. In vain were bridges hewn from beneath their feet. On they trudged and writhed and surged. This is all moving through across the land stuff. And surged until they rolled into Savannah, a starved and naked horde of tens of thousands. So, how to wrap this up? With Long's methodology, we can now entertain not the idea that we will look at African American religious meanings in terms of what just happened in the church, though we also read how important that was, but rather by having this larger meta-image of at the point where a human on the landscape is asking questions of ultimacy. What is my relationship to past, to present, and to future? And it's telling me it's time to finish. Past, present, and to future. What is my relationship to the divine? What is my significance? That is where the study of religious lives takes on its most powerful meanings. All right. Thanks for listening.